What's up guys, Jayztwocents here, and here we are bringing you our very first video in our first set that we built. We got 2 more to go, but that's besides the point. This has been an exciting Computex, one that I'm sad that I've missed, but alas, I have to move the studio and I have this to build, so I'm kind of glad that I stayed to do this, but at the same time, man, this is an exciting year when it comes to Intel versus AMD. So we're gonna talk about a few things today. We're not gonna talk specifically about the specs. We'll talk about it a little bit. I'm not gonna give you an overview of Intel's announcements and AMD's announcements because I'm sure you've already seen those videos in your inbox. So rather than be repetitive and just share the information with you again, I'm gonna go ahead and invite you guys to go and look at your other favorite content creators that are at Computex right now covering that information and the keynotes and stuff as they're happening. What I wanna do right now is talk to you about the way of thinking moving forward with CPU purchases, because summertime is when most people tend to upgrade or buy a whole new computer or build a whole new computer. And there's some things I think you guys need for food for thought because the entire status quo is changing. Today's video is brought to you by NordVPN, a VPN service I have been using for years. Now look, you wouldn't walk around with your precious expensive cell phone without a case on it, would you? Okay, I guess plenty of you do, but I digress. So, put a case around your internet experience. Why let the ISPs slow you down and control your data and control your packets, slowing down your streaming services, YouTube, Netflix, and all that sort of stuff? And with Article 13 and the constant up in the air, no one knows what's happening, net neutrality here in the US, you can stop people from spying on your internet connection and your data and slowing down your internet by connecting to a secure VPN. Now, NordVPN has more than 5,000 servers in 60 countries using military-grade encryption, meaning nobody can keep an eye or spy on your data besides you. You can get 75% off a 3-year membership, and if you use my offer code Jayztwocents at checkout, you get an extra month for free. So put a case around your internet. Stop screwing around and letting people control your data. I'm serious. Get an extra month for free and 75% off a 3-year membership by using Jayztwocents at checkout. All right, so we got some exciting stuff to talk about here. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of competition in the CPU space since like back in the early 2000s with the Athlon 4800 and 5000 days where AMD was CPU king. So the highly anticipated Ryzen 3000 or the Zen 2 architecture, which is already kind of confusing in the naming, but that's okay, it's besides the point. Who cares what you call it as long as it gets the job done in the way you want to do it at a price you want to get it, which you're kind of getting all of that. So we've got 5 new SKUs here from AMD, and I'm not gonna go through all the specs, okay? I'm not gonna do that because this video is more or less talking to you about the product, maybe how to look at the big picture in terms of buying or building or upgrading your new computer or your existing computer, because summertime tends to be the most common time people do it because of Computex. So I'm gonna put some food for thought, plant some seeds in your brain, hopefully some roots that come out your ears to help you figure out how to look at this in terms of building or upgrading your next computer. We'll also talk a little bit about what Intel showcased, but to be honest, Intel didn't show anything new regarding processors, except for one, which kind of deserves a joke all on its own. We'll talk about that later. So we've got the Ryzen 5, 2 SKUs for Ryzen 5, 2 SKUs for Ryzen 7, and a new Ryzen 9, which is the 3900X, their new flagship 12-core, 24-thread, 7 nanometer, or it's a TSMC 7 nanometer FinFET architecture, which is funny because Intel has been like unable to even get their 10 nanometer stuff out in a timely manner. AMD is now rocking a 7 nanometer FinFET, but in a different way. So we'll kind of talk about that. And that's what I sort of want to get some food for thought in your guys' head. Now, we don't know yet what the boost clock is going to be for all cores. We do know that the base clock is a 3.8 gigahertz on, which is kind of funny. It's 3.8, which is faster than like even the 3600, which is a Ryzen 5, but 3.8 on all cores on the 3900X, 3.9 on the 3800X, which is an 8-core 16-thread. What a lot of people were kind of hoping for, which might still come later, was an 18-core 36-thread mainstream desktop processor, because these are running on AM4 still, but it's an X570 chipset. So if you're gonna be going to the store looking for like an X470 that's compatible with some of like the 3600 and 3600X, because remember, AMD promised us AM4 to at least 2020, which means it's possible to put an incompatible processor into a motherboard and vice versa. So what you want to look for first of all is that sticker on the box that says Zen 2 ready, or whatever the sticker is going to be, just like we saw with the 2000 series Ryzen versus the 1000 series or the 1800 and all that sort of stuff. But with the 12 core 24 thread, we're seeing a 4.6 gigahertz max boost clock. Now we don't know yet how many cores are going to be boosted at that. Usually when we talk about max boost clock, it's 1 or 2 cores. And you're probably going to see the same thing here. But 4.6 gigahertz on even 1 or 2 cores is pretty damn good, considering the fact if you've tried to overclock any previous Ryzen processor, then you would probably remember or know that getting above 3.9 or 4 gigs is a chore on all cores. So that's why I'm trying to, I really can't wait to see what we're actually gonna be getting in terms of all core boost clock, because 3.8 is already an overclock for even the older processors, and getting 3.8 on all cores was difficult. They're now doing it with 12 core, 24 thread on 7 nanometer. What you might have noticed though, is the lack of any discussion regarding Threadripper, and they're using the term EPYC again, which was their data center processors, their cloud farm processors, rendering processors, that sort of stuff. It was a very high-end enterprise solution with tons of core count. Remember what? 32 cores or something like that, 24 cores in each one, something, very high core count. And what it looks like might be happening here is AMD is trying very hard to reach that mainstream market with a higher core count, rather than segmenting their product stack with an extreme platform and a mainstream platform. But to have a single product stack that can scale from extra small to extra large, rather than then having to switch out your whole platform, like for a new motherboard and all that sort of stuff, which is what Intel's been doing for quite a while. Fun fact, the only way you can get a 12 core, 24 thread processor on Intel is to go with a 7920X, which is significantly more money than the $499 price point. Also too, the 12 core 24 thread is a 105 watt part versus I believe 140 watts on the Intel 7920X. So not only have they matched the core count, not only have they matched and technically exceeded the boost clock and turbo clock, or boost clock of the base clock and boost clock of the Intel part, they're doing it at less power. So all of those heat your room and set your home on fire in the summertime AMD jokes should just be dubbed now Intel jokes if you want to be technical about it. So that's definitely worth looking at. All the processors though on Zen 2 do feature PCI Express 4.0. Let's talk about that for a second. I've seen some comments on Twitter and Facebook and online of, who cares about PCIe 4.0? It doesn't matter because our graphics cards are still not saturating PCIe 3.0, which was the same discussion we had when 3.0 came out, because PCIe 2.0 was still kind of the norm then. I think a lot of people are failing to look at here is this is not just about graphics. This is also about a lot of people now utilizing the PCI Express interface for mass storage, or for RAID cards, or for M.2 cards and stuff like that, where the actual bottleneck for your I/O on your storage becomes the interface itself. So we know SATA has been saturated for a long time. SATA 6 is long gone. 550 megabytes is the theoretical fastest you can get on that, which is why we moved to M.2 on the motherboard directly. But the problem is you're limited to how many of those M.2 slots you can have on your motherboard because of spacing and that it takes up already. Plus, having it mounted down flat on your motherboard introduced some cooling issues, especially when they're sitting underneath of a graphics card blowing hot air on them. So a lot of people would go with some sort of a PCI Express card to put your M.2s on there, which now doubles M.2 RAID cards as well. You start having two M.2s and a PCI Express, you can definitely saturate that throughput very, very quickly, much faster than any graphics card could. So PCI Express 4.0 is very beneficial for those people looking for extremely fast storage. So that's something definitely worth talking about. Oh, also too, the system memory specification is 3200 3200 megahertz on all of the parts, which is significantly higher than the original 2133 of the original Ryzen stuff. The other thing I want to talk about here though, in terms of questions, the only concern I have, and the reason why I have this concern, and I can't wait to test these parts, is the fact that Threadripper had the Infinity Fabric. That's what Intel referred to as the glue. They're just multiple chips put on or they're multiple SoCs that's just glued together. Yeah, no, the Infinity Fabric was a very well thought out engineered piece of ingenuity, putting multiple like chiplets together and having them communicate. The issue was, when we learned specifically about it at SIGGRAPH back in 2017, was the fact that the Infinity Fabric introduced a little bit of latency. And a little bit of latency, depending on the process that's happening and the instructions, could turn into a big result depending on the task that you're doing, namely gaming. Threadripper, I don't think, was ever really intended to be a gaming CPU, but you could play games on it. And the problem was that, and they specifically went through lessons on this when we went through our press day, was some games saw a beneficial increase in FPS, minimum FPS, and max FPS by disabling the Infinity Fabric altogether and going from that creator mode to that gamer mode. The problem was you lost half your cores with it. But the problem was you then had to go in and be like, okay, I'm gonna play this game, I'm gonna disable it. Now I'm gonna do some work, I need to re-enable it. And it was just kind of cumbersome to have to deal with something like that. So considering the fact that Zen 2 and the core counts that you're seeing here are dual 7nm chiplets, with a third 14nm I/O chiplet, which is handling things like the memory controller, the PCI Express, the chipset, all that sort of stuff. I'm curious as to what that situation is going to be again. Have we seen enough of an improvement in that Infinity Fabric architecture to where that increased latency is not going to be an issue, where you can just leave it active all the time? So those are the 5 new SKUs from AMD: the 3600, 3600X, 3700X, 3800X, which is funny though, both the 3700 and 3800 are both 8-core 16-thread parts. So they are not to be confused where it was like the X version was the same core count but a little bit faster. They've kind of restructured the stack a little bit. They all are featuring obviously DDR4. They all require a discrete graphics card. They also are as low as 65 watts. So the 3600 being a 6-core, 12-thread part, using 65 watts. So obviously AMD has been really working hard at the efficiency. We still need to see what the actual IPC improvements are on this when we get hands-on with that, which won't be until probably closer to July. We have a launch date July 7th. The next bit of information we're gonna get is gonna be on June 10th or right around there at E3. So yeah, we still a lot of waiting. We learned some at CES, we learned more at Computex, we're gonna learn a little more at E3, and we'll get the big picture in July. So it's kind of like enough already. But do you want to know how you can tell that AMD is putting the pressure on Intel? Normally AMD was the one that kind of had those little tongue-in-cheek marketing campaigns like 4 gigs means 4 gigs when NVIDIA was going through the 3.5 gig 970 debacle. They were also known that anytime Jensen was on stage or doing a keynote, or Intel was doing a keynote or something, they were putting out these little blast marketing campaigns like, hey, we're over here, don't forget us, we're waving our flag. And it was almost like unbecoming because some of it was really in bad taste. It's kind of funny because Intel's sort of doing that now because everyone's talking about AMD, like I am right now. I started my channel with AMD. I started with an FX 8120 and I upgraded to an 8350. And then from there, I think I went to a Z77 or something, and I've been playing around with Intel ever since because the max performance gains were always on Intel, better overclocking and stuff. But what's also happening too with this chiplet design is it's allowing them to do better binning, because they can actually bin the chiplets before they're actually like final composition or construction of the die, because once it's all put together with the controller and everything on the exact same die, then you're stuck with it. And then if it doesn't pass validation, then you have to step down the cores or lock the cores. Remember the old days with core that were locked on AMD, and then you could go in and unlock them and maybe get an unstable processor? Now they can do a much better job at binning, which means we'll probably see better overclocking. We'll probably see better across the board performance in terms of just, you know, some processors, like you give it 50 megahertz and it just crashes on its face because those are the ones that met the spec but barely. We'll probably see a much better job at overclocking with these processors. But Intel was kind of putting out a lot of blast marketing like, hey, more cores doesn't mean better. Cores are not created equal. Oh yeah, AMD also doesn't suffer from zombie load. I almost said zombie land. Yeah. Rule 36, never buy Intel. That's why AMD doesn't suffer from zombie load, and it had very little impact from Meltdown and Spectre. So there was nothing new to talk about with desktop processors for Intel. They really focused on mobile processors. They talked about some their integrated graphics changes that are coming. We'll do a whole separate video on that. We will be doing hopefully some Intel testing with some of their new notebooks. They've really stepped up their internal graphics, or their iGPUs, to try and compete with like the Vega stuff that you saw with AMD's 2200G and 2400G. That's obviously because they poached Raja and they've also now poached Tap from NVIDIA. So I think we're gonna see the graphics department get bolstered, where you might see now is Intel get better at the iGPU side, but suck a little more at the CPU stuff because they're putting all those eggs in that basket, where AMD's CPU side is extremely strong. We need the graphics side of AMD to now put the pressure on NVIDIA. That's what we truly need. And Intel's gonna try that too with their graphics and discrete graphics cards as well. So it's becoming extremely exciting. But let's talk about the one desktop CPU that Intel was sort of talking about. The 9900KS, or which has been dubbed the Keep Spending. Basically, it's the exact same 9900K you've always been used to that comes out of the box with all cores boosting to 5 gigahertz, which I've yet to find a 9900K that couldn't do that already. Yeah, so anyway, if you're looking at building or buying a new computer in the near future, I would highly wait until after we see the independent reviews on the AMD. Not because I don't think it's gonna be worth it, but because I think it's gonna be better than a lot of us are anticipating. And that is a huge claim for me because I have always said, take AMD news with a grain of salt, because AMD has always been known to have some questionable charts and questionable marketing and stuff, and the hype train that always derailed right before launch. I think AMD is gonna do everything in their power to make sure this one lives up to what we expected, which is why we've been waiting so long for it. So anyway, guys, this is where you chime in now, and whether or not you think AMD Zen 2 is worth waiting for. What are you guys excited for when it comes to CPUs going through this summer? We are going to be doing obviously builds and benchmarks with these. I have a lot of high hopes for this, and I hope that I'm not let down. But that's why this is just a talking head piece, because this is all speculative. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and sound off down in the comments below. I'm sure the fanboyisms are gonna come out in full force, so just, you know what, have at it. This is also the complaints bin. If you have any complaints, put them in here.
You're gonna break our new set already, dude.
Welcome to my new bedroom.
What? Oh.
Welcome to my lair. We should. Was that? Could you hear that? And now we just need the NVIDIA side of AMD, or the NVIDIA side. Yeah, we.